World events can absolutely affect your business. The real question is, what can you do about it and how much should you care? I'm Riley, this is Ped, and we've both built six-figure coaching and consulting businesses. And today we've worked with hundreds of solopreneurs, including coaches, facilitators, and consultants who've since built predictable five-figure months. In this episode, we're going to have a really raw conversation about current political events and how it's impacted us both personally, as well as some real examples about how it can affect your business more day to day and what to look out for so you can avoid getting swept up in the mess. Um, that's
Yeah.
I know it's a mouthful. But I guess I'm just, God, where do you even start? Do you want to just share? Should I start with an example actually? Because I feel like if you have no idea what we're talking about, that might be a good segue
Yeah. Well,
into
I mean,
this. Is that fair?
yeah, you start with the example and then we'll see where we go.
So, um, and we'll circle back to all this, but I'm someone who tends to default as I just don't plug into news a lot. So I'm usually the person finding out after the fact when something in the world has happened. And my first inkling was getting a direct message from someone that I'd been having conversation with, and they were like, "What is your president doing?" And I was like, "God, I don't know. Let me go find out." So that was the first glimpse. But then a really real example, which we can unpack more later. But I had a call with someone scheduled that needed to reschedule because they were escaping their country in the Middle East. And I was like, "Oh, why are you escaping that country?" It was, and just for anonymity's sake, I'll just, it wasn't one that I had heard of yet, typically in the news. And so I had to do a little bit more digging. And this is where kind of the heart of this, episode lies is, um, I had to basically educate myself on what's happening in the world and why it is affecting my business and my schedule and my calendar. And I know there's so many more layers to this, but that's a real example that happened within days of us recording this episode, about how, your schedule is going to be impacted potentially by real world events. And right now there's multiple wars, I guess you'd say, going on in the Middle East. And so that has that's part of what's the topic is
Yeah.
today.
And I mean, I know that we've spoken about this before where I know you take the I'm not paying attention to the news piece because it's part of a philosophy that I know it's not just you that has this around what can I control and what can I not control.
Yeah.
And so much of the news I will acknowledge is just fluff and surface, and oftentimes it's storm in a teacup. Is that the right expression?
I've not heard that, but I like that.
I think it
Storm in
might
a
be a
teacup.
British expression. Yeah, storm in a teacup. Um, I'm terrible with expressions. And then there are other times when the storm is an actual like war, right? And for me, I for good or bad, I take the opposite view of paying attention to news and probably pay attention to it way too much on a day-to-day basis. I think I have like three or four different news podcasts I listen to pretty much every day. I mean, they basically tell the same news, but just different people's commentary on it. And more recently, yeah, the I'm half Iranian, and so the conflict in the Middle East right now is occupying a lot more of my headspace and maybe heart space than other world events or other political events. And I think that's the other flip side of things is the kind of the functional thing of, oh, a client it's got to reschedule because of something that's happening in the world, to, oh shit, this is stuff that's affecting me on a personal level, and that affects the business as well because I'm not firing on all cylinders doing the stuff that we've got to do.
Yeah, well, I mean, so that's sort of the premise of this episode, right? Is like how does it affect you personally? How much can you do about it? How much should you care? What are I mean, this could probably be a 3 hour podcast if we let it. We won't for that's listening, just to be aware. But what I'd like to do, if this is okay, Pet, is just try to tackle one piece at a time because it's so easy. I think so many people get swept up in like the emotional arc. It's not even an arc. It's like an emotional storm,
Hmm.
hurricane of like you just blend everything together, and when like a blender, if you throw everything in, you can't tell what's like, it all just you can't make sense of anything. You just know that all this shit is in there. And so, what I'd like to do is take actually the different ingredients, take it apart, and just I'm not saying we're going to be able to give you any right or wrong answers in this episode, but at least we can give maybe some different perspectives, and you can sort of take out the pieces as a viewer, as a listener that are relevant to you or that might be useful for you. Does
Yeah,
that
do it. Let's do it.
make sense?
Yeah.
So I like the I'd like to start with the personal first because I think it gets overlooked, and um I know I'm someone that can overlook it, but it's I think something we were talking about before we hit record was it's really easy to I'm gonna mess up the expression here, but it's something like cracking eggs. It's like sometimes you just gotta crack some eggs, like, make a mess to solve XYZ problem. And I think what I was saying is that it's much easier to hold that perspective when it's not your eggs.
Yes.
So the idea about the personal, there's the internal world, and then there's also your personal relationship with the external world. And so I think that um, just like to me, I'm not saying it is the same thing, but I think it presents or can feel similar to like, have you ever, if someone's listening and like you have a colleague, or maybe you've been this person where you show up to work like the morning after you got in like a big fight with your spouse, you might show up like almost like you're hungover, like you're groggy, you're distracted, your head like you didn't sleep well, your head's not clear, and all of that is kind of it's the same symptoms that can present when there's something internally
Hmm.
eating at your someone's cracking your eggs.
Yeah.
Someone's you know what I mean? Like you
Well,
have
I mean, yeah, if I just elevate that up, the the challenge with a lot of eggs, well, the idea of cracking eggs, and if that's truly the case, right? When there are people who control levers of power, they hold everybody's eggs.
they hold the basket, we'll put it
They
that way.
hold the basket. That's it. They hold the basket, and they're like dropping the basket, and then you gotta like question: Are are they a safe custodian of the basket? And if they are going to crack some eggs to cook, are they even a competent omelet cook? Are they going to burn the eggs? Just, because
Chicken
actually,
shepherd, I don't
but
know.
genuinely, like that, I think this is when it comes to, and maybe I'm uh, collapsing a few things here, but I'll say what I'm going to say, and then you tell me. But then um, that does create the conditions, the macro conditions for the businesses that we operate into to go in. So forget the personal at this point. Like it's the if, for example, right now, the at the time of recording, the price of crude oil has gone above $100 per barrel, which is the highest it's been since the Ukraine war started 6 years ago, or is it since? Sorry, I think it's the highest since whatever it is. It's high, right? Um, the knock-on impact of that will be higher grocery prices. There'll be higher fuel costs. There'll be less discretionary income and all that. Which, and when it comes to people deciding what they're going to do with their money, then that does have a kind of a
Knock on
business
effect, yeah.
knock-on effect, right? Yeah, and I don't know whether this is this part of the conversation or the next part around like what can we control? Because of course, like we can't just go, then fuck it, let's not have a business then, because
Well,
that's all the solution.
I mean, but honestly, for some people, maybe it is. I don't
Yeah.
know. And that's the thing is like I'm very much less of putting like morals and ethics aside. That's a whole nother conversation. When it comes to business tactics and strategy, I'm a little bit less of a is black and white, right or wrong. It's more about like, well, within the parameters we're talking about, is this right or wrong? As in, does this help or hurt? Is this um, useful or not useful? And so a lot of my thinking on this stems from sports psychology. And so when we talk about the personal, it actually reminds me of a presentation I gave in grad school on is stress management. And one of the things I talked about was the 4 A's of stress management, which, if I can remember right, were in no particular order: avoid, alter, um, accept, and adapt. And so two of those were kind of internal decisions and two were external decisions. And without going into like the nuts and bolts of what each of those are, basically when it comes to the personal side of things, so that you're internal, like you're showing up groggy, you're not feeling good, like whatever the circumstance, it's like, and so what? Like right now in this moment, you're feeling this way. What are you going to do about it? And I think this is where, for me, it starts to, when it comes to work performance or working on your business or showing up as your best self, um, this is my wheelhouse. When you talk about performance psychology, like I love this conversation. And this is where I operate from the, again, it's like, what does this help or hurt? And so to me, sometimes you need to take a break and like take a step back and recalibrate or clear your head or take a sick day or what, whatever the thing is. But the reality is if you're working towards a goal, there will always be challenges, whether they are internal or external. And this, in a very crude, plain way, is just another challenge. So what are you going to do about it in business context? And so again, whether you're showing up for work after a fight with your spouse or significant other or whatever, or you have a deep personal connection to something else that's happening in the world, and it's affecting your mental state. How are you managing that? And I think a lot of times, at least what I see online and in social media, is people talking about like, self-care and you got to take care of yourself. And this actually was a big narrative when I was the COO for the mental health consultancy. We kind of push back on this a little bit because it's like, yes, and if you treat yourself to a pint of ice cream because you're not feeling good, is that actually self-care, or are you just starting a bad habit? It's like it might feel good in the moment, but again, it's like moment to moment. Sure, this helps right now. Maybe if you've got like a really important meeting to get to, have that extra cup of coffee, wake yourself up, whatever. But long term, it's like, what do you do? What is in your control that you can do for yourself to make yourself okay? Because like that saying, you can't pour from an empty cup.
Mm-hmm.
What do you need to do to fill your cup right now?
Yeah.
How do you sustain yourself? And we talk to our clients about this like
Mm-hmm.
every day, every week. We talk about MVCs, minimum viable commitment. Like, what are the habits that you're building? And it's the psychology behind that as well. So I think on the personal side, like I'm gonna just keep that wall there before we talk
Yeah.
about the external. It's very much the same conversation, no matter what the trigger or reason or whatever the outside circumstances are. That internal state remains the same. And
And
sometimes the circumstances are worse than
yeah,
others, but it's
right. And I
that's
wonder,
the same thing.
and that's, and just to be clear then, and we are, because in a way, you could apply that whatever context that you are in, right? And now, the
100%.
I would say that there are extreme scenarios where, when we talk about, say, business, like how we're going to show up to the business, there might be, for example, thinking about war zones where realistically, like let's say we were caught up in that directly, there's bombs like falling around us.
Yeah.
I'd say like business kind of stops
Oh,
right now.
100%. Yeah.
There's an existential crisis, and yet I'd say that I can see how all the things, the 4 A's that you talked about, then apply to that moment, because
Well, and
obviously,
the first rule of like one of the avoid from stress management, like that's the first, right? I mean, and oh my God, this should go without saying, but like if you are not around to operate your business, I feel
but
stupid
also, I
saying
mean, there are
this.
some scenarios where, in a way, like that, having it just there is no business to even have if you're like, let's say,
Exactly.
you've
Yeah.
got no internet, you've got. I mean, I'm thinking about us
Ah,
like,
yeah.
if we didn't have the internet, we don't have we don't have a business.
No, yeah. I
You,
mean,
we,
internet, got the customers down the street.
yeah,
I mean, this should go without saying, but it starts to, yeah, you have to be safe and alive
yeah, right. It's
and
sort of
I
the
mean,
lower rung of Maslow's hierarchy of needs
yeah,
has to,
infrastructure.
when it comes to
Yeah.
like operating the business, unless you're a very resourceful individual when it comes to creating
Uh,
opportunities in amongst.
yeah,
And
yeah,
that's a different story altogether. I'm sure there are people out there who, you know, probably capitalize a lot
but
in other.
but this is what I mean about that. Like, it starts to spill into external, because like one of the external things you can do is avoid that. So remove yourself from that situation and move to somewhere else where there is infrastructure, or there is, and it starts to move into external strategies. But us, if we have the assumptions that you
Yeah,
still have internet, that you still have,
yeah,
like, your business is still intact, and you are still intact, then how are you showing up? Like, that's the personal stuff, which then does influence. And maybe we should just start talking about the extra, because
yeah,
there is a massive spectrum when it comes to the range of what you're dealing with externally, from a fight with spouse to bombing my house. I mean,
yeah,
it's just, and it feels crazy to put that in the same sentence, but that's, I mean, those are some of the conversations we're having about, again, the conflicts in the Middle East, but then also, like the example I gave of having to reschedule because of someone who, I mean, our experiences are so different, from me sitting in New York, not having to think about that at all day to day, versus someone who was like, I need to reschedule our call because I'm evacuating. Like,
yeah,
oh, that's totally okay. Yeah,
yeah,
let's,
yeah, yeah,
yeah, 100%. Um, and having empathy for that, which is part of the, I guess that kind of goes back to the personal, but it starts to weave together at that point. But it's,
yeah.
it's having
And
the
then,
awareness of the circumstances.
yeah, but then when it comes to, so should we move the conversation? So that's a personal, and now like business, right? So, um, I know before we pressed record, I was musing on, what effect does the sort of the macroeconomic climate, or even like the mood music of what's happening in the economy, uh, might affect anyone's decision, either at a conscious or a subconscious level, when it comes to, uh, for example, investing in coaching or investing in whatever. It's essentially thinking about whether it's our clients or our potential clients starting to work with us, or our
Their
clients'
clients.
clients.
Yeah.
It's just all because that's the kind of the ecosystem. And I know that, for example, in one of our worksheets, which we give our clients to like reflect on the opportunity space, we get them to think about their niche's niche, or like their who who it is that they are seeking to serve, and where their income source is. And so
Yeah.
when we're thinking about the macroeconomics situation, if people are and again at a kind of a macro level are thinking, "Ooh, I don't know, the economy is not feeling great," then I'm not going to go out. I might like hoard some more money just in case I don't know what's going to happen, or
Yeah.
whatever it might be. I might not spend money on, you know, um, a fancy steak or going to theater or whatever. Like, there might be just these different things that people make a decision around, which has a knock-on impact on the butcher or the theater, and then the
Yeah.
actor.
Well, you're
And
talking about economics at this point.
economics,
I
right?
mean,
Exactly. I mean,
yeah.
I'm not an economics major in any shape or form, but
Yeah.
that ultimately creates I guess the conditions for any of our businesses as solopreneurs, or kind of um, freelancers, entrepreneurs, whoever, like however you identify as a self-employed person.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, that's the condition that we're in, and so I still think it's important to remember that even in amongst economic downturn, there is still an economy, and there are still people selling services, selling the services that we sell, selling the services that you sell. They and they are making a living out of it. Some of them are making shitloads of money out of it. It's not because the economy is bad or good. It's just they have figured out how to get clients, find customers, and serve them well in
Yeah.
amongst all of that. And that's the
Yeah.
thing that I always remember.
I mean, that's going back to, so we're talking about how much you care. We can, I think there's a little more to add to that, but then it's like, and how much can you control? Um, And I think that's kind of what you're speaking to as well. Where I saw the stat, I think it was just the other day. I don't know how true the stat is, but I just saw it that said it was something like 70, was it 2 or 3% of luxury items are bought by the middle class.
Oh, wow.
Which yeah. And so it's just you think about how much of the world is propped up by the middle class, like just everyday people, I'll put it that way. And obviously, whatever you're offering, I mean, we're speaking in really broad terms here. So when it comes to differentiating yourself and positioning, the kinds of topics we typically talk about, um, it's actually is making me think of it. It's how does your business evolve as well, and being able to be nimble and agile, or putting a new offer to market. I mean, if the world is truly in a recession, or like when COVID happened, my God, the number of my clients said at that time that I mean had to change their whole business. Like it was that was the whole world though. Like that was like
Yeah.
there's just no other way around it. So obviously, world events were shaping businesses at that time. Just and so this I guess it's really easy to get swept up in the like new news, the new like the the
Yeah,
fact
that
like
is like
something's happening.
it's like the climate versus the weather, right? There's a lot of
Yeah,
news that's just like more like weather that it just comes and goes, but then the climate that you operate in is a little bit more steady. So like COVID being the example, that fundamentally shifted a good, depends where you are in the world, but like a good few months at a minimum, but up to like 2 years of how people worked and operated before things. I mean, even I mean, I'd say there's still echoes of it now, although there's definitely a backlash of some of the working habits, especially in a corporate setting where you know, a lot of big companies that spent a lot of money on fancy offices, and they're going, you need to come back to work now, right? So there's definitely, there's backlashes and all those things, but yeah, I suppose that maybe as you're saying, talking about that is making me think, where do you just hold steady and just weather the storm, and where do you actually need to really kind of reflect on how are you changing your business, like business model, business offering, um, and the strategies around it.
yeah, and I think this is where awareness comes in, and being reflective. And honestly, I mean, just having that outside perspective, someone outside of your bubble or outside of your business can really help you make these decisions, because it kind of goes back to that, like, is this just a bad day at the office and you're bouncing back tomorrow? In that case, like probably, don't change anything. Another way I've heard this is like if you're at like target practice, I don't know, say you're an archer and you're bow and arrow. If the wind blows right when you release and then you change your aim, you that's wrong. Like you shouldn't be like you shouldn't always account for a gust of wind come, like it's like no, that was just the weather, versus like has the climate changed where like you're in the season where there's always a northwesterly
Yeah.
wind, or I don't know, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you're in the jet stream. So well then you should adjust. And so I'm like being able to recognize those patterns and see, big scale, big picture. Man, it's not my expertise other that like to dissect that, other than to say it just comes with time and experience. Like to be able to tell, like, I'll put it this way. I remember when I was a kid, when 9/11 happened, I remember my dad telling me that this is going to be in the history books. And at the time, I had zero context. I was like, why is this history when I was like, I don't understand. I just didn't understand. I just was lacking the awareness
Mhm.
at a young age, versus getting older. Like you 100% know. Like just to use that example, like if I was a 30 something year old with 9/11 happening today, I'd be like, that, oh, yes, that's going to be in the history books. Um, and so I think that I don't know how else to say, it just comes with time and experience to be able to separate the weather from the climate, and to
Mhm.
be able to tell how much you should adapt or adjust or, pivot. And again, that applies to both. internal and personal and also external. So personal is, do you need that pint of ice cream to make yourself feel better so that you can come back tomorrow like full steam, or even better, get extra sleep that night or something that's actually self-care, not like what people, yeah, I'll just leave it at that. Versus external, it's like, do you need to evacuate the country? Do you need to change the way you design and deliver your programming, like in COVID? Do you need to change your target audience because the country that you were working with, there's maybe like a new political barrier where you're not allowed to do trade with that. Like it's just, I don't know how else to say. Those are very real things that it does pay to be aware of, and this is where maybe different perspectives that hopefully this is helpful for someone out there listening, watching. My default has always been to just not pay attention to the news, and I just wait till I hear something and then I respond to it accordingly. Versus the other way around, you probably could get ahead of it faster, but in my experience, a lot of it does become noise where it's like, it's not that there aren't great and terrible or whatever things happening in the world, but it goes back to how much can you control? And that's really the question, is like, what should you control? What should you try to control? Does that make sense?
Yeah. And if I just use that as a way of just tying up this episode, when it comes to business, and that's, this is a big part of our podcast theme, how to run a successful coaching, consulting, or facilitation business. The things that you can control are the pieces that just put you in front of customers and get you talking to them, right? And so many of the answers lie in your engagement with your customers. And that's to plug what we do and to plug our community, networkandsell.com. Go check it out. We teach you the fundamentals of what you need to do to engage with your customers. And these are timeless principles. You don't have to, we could take these principles and apply them to 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. It's just the means by which you reach your customers are different because of technology. And if that interests you, then check it out, networkandsell.com. And if you're not on our newsletter where we do further deep dives, share stories, share resources, go ahead and subscribe at leverageaccelerator.co. We'll see you next time. Oh, did you want to say something?
I guess, yeah, I want to have a final takeaway for people.
Different. Yeah.
From your perspective, Ted, whether it's the internal or external, especially because we're sharing different perspectives, what do you think the most useful takeaway from this episode and like this conversation? Because some people, I'm just thinking about, some people are going to listen to this and I don't know, they might really need some fresh perspective, or that kick in the ass, or a shot in the arm, or just something that takes them out of the headspace they're currently in. Because when you're in it, you know what I mean? When you're in it, you have that emotional carnage that's just happening in your head. Like, what do you think is the most useful, from your perspective, just personally speaking, the most useful takeaway that would really help someone out?
Unless you personally are in an existential crisis let me rephrase that. Unless your life is at risk directly, then you can worry and ruminate all you want. But really, it's a tough question, actually, Riley, because I'm also thinking about the family that I have in Iran right now, that it's hard to kind of contact. And we might cut this out, but yeah, genuinely, like, that's the thing. Like, I don't know how you can, especially when you care about people, how you can like turn that off so easily.
I don't think it is easy. I think that's part of why it's an important question.
Do you have a takeaway? I don't know about this last bit of this video, but do you have a takeaway? We'll see what we can do in the post edit.
Yeah, it's because I don't think it's that it's easy. I don't think any of this is easy. It's just the like, is it the Occam's razor? Is that where I'm using that right? It's it goes back to, it's another sports like principle for me, but it's using the filter of help or hurt. And it's kind of like whether your life is at risk or someone you know their life is at risk, or and you kind of go through this. I'm not saying it has to be this logical order, but it's just thinking through like, what are my priorities? And for most people, like safety, health, family, top priorities, fair to
Yeah.
say. And so I think it's just a lot of this comes back to, it might sound overly simple, but it's being clear on what your values are. And um, I just like I'll share, vulnerably for me, my priority, I have those same priorities. And so for me, I have more influence over how I can affect the outcome for my personal world, bubble, friends, family, by operating and prioritizing specific tasks, activities, you know, trips, meeting up with, like whatever your life looks like. And so if something is out of alignment, I think it's very fair, good or bad for business. I think it's fair to, you know, make a shift so that you're back in alignment. Because if you're,
Mhm.
yeah, obvious, I feel dumb saying this, but it's obviously, if your life is at risk, then something should change. If someone you deeply care about, their life is at risk, then something should change. But then it comes back to the question of what can you do about it? And whether it's, well, either I have to change the way I'm thinking to be able to, like, maybe you can't move if you're in a, a bomb zone. Like, that's just that's so real. And there's nothing you can, like, I don't know what else you can do about that other than I'd start getting creative and thinking about, well, what else can I do? Can I leverage any of my business relationships? Do I have any connections? Like, that shifts priorities for me versus if my clients are in a bomb zone, I'm starting to think this sound like same thing. How can we move you? And once you move, then we can start working our way down that priorities list where it's like, okay, bottom of Maslow's hierarchy, you're saying, like, that's cleared. All right, then let's start. And it might feel a little methodical, but for me, that's the best way that I've learned how to work through pressure situations. And again, like, I've worked with brain surgeons, I've worked with sales directors, I've worked alongside former Olympians and current Olympians, and that's the mindset that they
Yeah.
operate from, is how do I perform under pressure? And to me, a lot of this comes down to performance of, like, if your life depends on it, then that's an important performance. But then if your business depends on it, I think that's also an important performance. And so again, without assigning good or bad, it's just working my way through my priorities and my values and knowing that I have a limited amount of resources to deploy towards those
Yeah.
priorities. So it kind of goes back to the internal, external. This isn't really a super clear takeaway, but I think it's just giving yourself permission, I guess, is if it were me, it's permission to think through those, um, and act accordingly. Because people are in very different situations across the world right now. And I don't want to say to each their own, like, good luck, but like, I mean that to say, like, it's fair to change strategies, tactics, behavior, actions accordingly. Um, that's my takeaway.